Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. And Bradley's mother, Narky Skolin, passed away 3 months ago. He is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to the Italian Social Services. If he is ruled to go back, he will face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system where he cannot speak the language nor understand it. He will be taken away from the only family he has ever known. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. That's Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. Voice your concerns to keep Bradley here in the United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. I have a brand new guest on. His name is Roman Brik. He's a father who has been fighting for his fatherhood in the family court system in 2 states for over 5 years. Roman, who speaks 3 languages, was born under the communist rule in Soviet Union, worked as an attorney in Israel for many years, and earned an MBA degree from a top university, a combination of skills and experiences allowing him to develop a unique perspective on family court. In just a few months, Roman has established a popular citizen journalism project reaching tens of thousands of people, focusing on judicial accountability and the role of government in manufactured fatherlessness and motherlessness in America and across the world. But we're going to focus on Roman Brik's situation of his fatherlessness that he's been robbed of in the family court system. And I'm so honored to have you on, Roman Brik. Where are you at now with your case? And I'm very sorry you're going through this.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've been following your podcast. I know a few friends that whom you also interviewed. So really grateful, proud to be here. I know you have a great audience. I know people are expecting to see the interview. So thank you very much for doing what you do.
Well, thank you.
I am physically in New York,
Mhm.
the state to which you just referred in your introduction, in Staten Island. I have an active case, so I have to be judicious and careful when I speak about my case, not to be gagged. But it's an active case. I've been fighting to family courts to be a father, for the right of my children to have a father, for already over 5 years in 2 different states. The case started in the state of Washington. There was a separate relocation case. And now it's been over 2.5 years in Staten Island, New York Family Court, Richmond County. Most recently in front of Judge McFarland, and we can talk about judicial accountability as well, because it's important. It's protected fully by the First Amendment, and that's actually the reason for my starting my page on Facebook, uploading videos, starting the YouTube page. And I'm very grateful, but it seems that I hit the nail with my post, because I'm very grateful, but I was able to assemble an audience of literally tens of thousands of people who are watching and following, and I'm very grateful for everyone. And I know people actually reacted when I put the promo for our podcast, so thank you.
Oh, I thank you. You've been through a lot, from a case going from Washington into then New York. How stressful. I can't imagine.
Yeah, so of course it takes its emotional toll, but I made a post about that. It's a very interesting experience, because going through the family court, it allows you to get rid of all the propaganda and brainwashing that we all have been indoctrinated since childhood. So when you see the depth of human betrayal, when you see the depth of government depravity, it opens your eyes to so many things. And I am, to some extent, maybe to a large extent, I'm grateful for that experience, because I am now able to see through a lot of propaganda and a lot of gaslighting and the manipulation, social engineering that we're all subject to. And I think that's very important, because people who are caught in this family court nightmare, they tend to focus on that, and they lose the sight of the bigger picture. And that's the main theme of what I'm trying to expose and talk about on my page and in my writings. is the fact that family court is just a subset of government oppression that we are all experiencing. That's why I thank you for making this introduction. I think my set of experiences, first of all, as someone who was born under communism in the Soviet evil empire behind the Iron Curtain, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can see clearly the same patterns developing here in America, and I know for Americans it's very hard or maybe difficult to hear and understand. And don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful. I love this country. I think it's still the best country on earth, and it has the highest chances of defeating it since it was built on the right foundations of God and Constitution, which limits not our rights or defines our rights. It limits the powers of the government. So that's where the fight for justice, peaceful fight, but persistent fight has to take place. So America is a great country, but the processes, the subversion, the direction is absolutely the same. You see the propaganda, the flags, the use of language, the moving of the Overton window. It's all there, and family court is a key pillar for all of that, because how dictatorships start or how they endure and persevere by taking apart the family. It's right there in the Communist Manifesto. People who want, they may read my post, but one of the prominent ideologues of the Soviet Revolution, Alexander Kollontai, wrote that, and I'm paraphrasing, that mothers should forget that children are theirs. The children belong to the community, to the state. And we are seeing all that. So government is very clever. Divide and conquer has been the method of the ruling class for millennia, right? Mm-hmm. And we can clearly see it everywhere. So it's separating, sowing hatred between mothers and fathers, fathers and mothers. Children are being used. We saw recently, I don't know to what extent you want to go, but the recent PSYOP that endured for over 2 years, right? So people who took the injection, people who didn't take the injection. So it's manufacturing hatred. It's dividing the groups to the smallest possible subset in order to rule more efficiently.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's just very frustrating with the family court system when parents present evidence and these judges aren't looking at anything and they're just rolling willy-nilly. I don't know if that's happening in your case.
I can absolutely relate. So what happened in the family court system, it got absolutely subverted. So subversion is a sustained effort to hollow out the societal institution, right? That is presented under some cover or pretense, to the population, but then later on it takes a completely different role. So it's bait and switch essentially, and we see it in many institutions. People should be aware by now. The media is subverted. They promote an agenda, and in many cases, the schools became an indoctrination entity, right? Universities long time ago, and it's hard to maybe perceive, but the family courts are the same. Mm-hmm. Family courts are essentially an ideological arm of the government, and that's why it was very, very shocking. Mm-hmm. Because you come to the court, and as you mentioned, I have a background. I practiced law for many years, maybe too many years in Israel. I'm not a licensed attorney in New York, nothing like that. So I'm just a victim father. Mm-hmm. But it's very important to understand that the courts essentially now execute an ideology, and it's the same ideology that we're seeing in schools and everywhere. So that's why they ignore facts, they ignore law. I made a post about that. I listed over 30 items that needs urgent addressing by the public, by the legislature, that have to be fixed. But one of them, as you mentioned, Marianne, of course, it's the fact that judicial decisions are made many times in family court without a hearing, without evidence. And that's my focus recently, without a valid appellate process. In New York, a judge can make a temporary decision. That's what happened in my case, right? Mm-hmm. Without a hearing, without a petition. It was just talking, the other side, the state-appointed attorneys were talking, no petition. The kids were taken away, ostensibly for supervision, for investigation, and never returned. They were never returned to the previous schedule. And I appealed. I lost count. I appealed, I think, 7, 8, 9 times to the intermediary appellate court. It's called the appellate division here in New York. It's a subset of the conversation. We could talk about that, but the head of the division, Hector LaSalle, was recently twice rejected by the New York Senate. That's how, in my opinion, and apparently in the legislator's opinion, inept he is. So the same court rejected. They just don't want to hear. And what's the excuse? The excuse is it's an intermediary. They call it with a fancy legal term, interlocutory decision. They just refuse. They say it's a temporary decision. You're not entitled to an appeal as of right, and the leave to appeal has not been granted. They use it's very insidious. They use passive voice, so you don't really understand who did not grant the appeal, what the decision, the grant the leave, the permission to appeal, what's the decisions, what are the reasons, nothing. And then I went even higher. I went to the New York Court of Appeals. I went 3 times. I have 2 appeals pending right now. And it's the same thing. It's a one-line rejection issued by one judge, and Di Fiore, who also got removed. So we see some positive developments in the system, but we don't see real relief for the families. I actually went to the federal court, so it's precisely right. So we have basically completely unaccountable judiciary, and there's no way to appeal. And these temporary decisions, they set a schedule that allows the alienator to brainwash the children, and then the court hides behind the children. So it's a very carefully, very smart, very clever system developed over the decades.
It's very ingenious. I don't know if this happened in your case, but in a lot of cases that I'm hearing from other parents is the other side will shoot out a false accusation and even call out parental alienation when none of that's even happening. And then the judge just automatically gives the child to that person making the false accusations.
Yeah, so that's very important, and that's where I think mothers and fathers and all the victims of the court, and not the same thing, by the way. The same abuse happens in non-custody, not child, not family-related cases, right? You see the same thing with the elderly. So basically, what we're dealing with, and I feel the need to say it outright. It's predatory government. We see predatory practices, and we see the courts, and we see the whole cottage industry around them, essentially predated, right, preying on helpless victims. So the common denominator for us should be due process. We should all demand due process. If we go into the court, these are our courts. These are Americans' courts, right? These are our judges. These are our, paid by us through taxes, attorneys, and the whole staff, the whole personnel, the whole giant industry behind and around them. So we have to demand due process. And when you don't have due process, you have nothing. And we can talk about due process so long. I have a good colleague, maybe you should get him on the show as well, James Scaly. He started a very interesting project in New York here, cameras in courts. So why they can record us? You go into the court, right at the entrance, you have a camera. Actually, on the building, right? Before you actually enter the building, there's a subset of cameras. There's not a subset, there's many, right? And you go inside, you're photographed, you're videoed throughout the building, in the hallways. You're not allowed to record anything, even in the hallways, right? And especially in the courtroom. Why? Do they have something to hide? It's all done in order to prevent accountability. And they can come with multiple excuses, but it's just that. And there's no way to overcome. During my hearings, I brought people, other concerned New Yorkers, people who were taxpayers of the state, who wanted to court watch. And what happened? There was that completely inane claim that the courtroom is too small. Well, the courtroom is too small for justice, apparently, right? So we can only sit 3 people. Well, I have other people outside. Why they cannot get? Why can't they get in, right? And in this age, you just conducted almost 3 years. Some courts continue to this day hearings on Zoom, right? So do it in parallel. Have people who are physically present and open the courtroom to the public. Now in New York, it's the law. It's Section 4 of the Judicial Law. All court sittings, including family court, are open to the public, and it was done in order for the public to oversee their public officials in action, right? So it is completely subverted. It is completely subverted, like everything else. It's the law. They still ignore the law. And when you argue that, they say, no, we don't have enough room. Well, have another room. Open another room. Add again video. When you complain, it goes nowhere. So it's just an example of lack of due process. Fundamental thing, though, Marianne, if I may add, and that's another focus of mine, is the absence of jury trials. Now, the jury trials are guaranteed by the American Constitution. It's the only right that's guaranteed twice, and I keep talking about that because it's gaslighting. What we are experiencing is judicial gaslighting. It's in the Constitution, Section Amendment 6 and the Sixth Amendment, the Seventh Amendment, they speak about that. We were supposed to be protected from tyrannical oppression by the government in any type of cases, in criminal cases and in civil cases. Now, it's very clear that the government can, there's abundant case law by the United States Supreme Court. There was a recent decision in the matter of stock exchange. People can go on my website and my Facebook page to find it. I refer to that, but it has been established multiple times that it doesn't matter how the government labels the process, right? If it deprives people of their rights, they have to have a jury trial. We have nothing like that in family. So back full circle to your question, right? That's what's going on. Nobody, if nobody has due process, if people don't have due process, nobody has due process. It's mothers, it's fathers. They take the kids, they do whatever they want to us. So it's like we are, and it's a very, very clever system of oppression. There's so many layers to that. If you want, we can delve into that. But I don't want to subsume the other. So thank you.
Well, you mentioned cameras in court, and I've said this as well. We also need tamper-proof mics because I have court watched and I've sat through things where a judge is berating a pro se litigant and he gets tired of whatever she's saying or he's saying and just hits the mute button. And I don't think they should be able to be doing that.
Yeah, so it's mute button is a very interesting thing. I recently court watched for another court victim here. She's open, so I can mention her name, Victoria Navarro. She's fighting her own fight, and again, that's and very brave. She's a very brave mother. She went out publicly. James Kelly, another brave New Yorker, he live streamed it. I posted it, and it's all protected by the First Amendment without a doubt. And but she was actually berated for typing. Not only was she muted, right, and they muted on their end, so you cannot click on the microphone sign, but she was constantly mentioned or scolded for doing that. So there's when you mentioned that, it's funny because there's more insidious thing. These people are very sophisticated. The system is very, very sophisticated. They try to attack us for going on social media and talking about these unbelievable atrocities, right? There's no other word. But they have an army of propagandists, right, and an army of think tanks that think about that, and manuals and how to respond and flow charts, and it's a very, very clever process. The family court just celebrated here in New York 60 years of existence, but it started way before. So imagine that, how many layers of protecting this whole institution, right? This whole institutionalized orphanizing of children, they could develop in the time. So what they do is very interesting. It's something more insidious. They when you try to say something that can hurt the case from their perspective, they talk over you. So, and I saw judges doing that. Of course, the opposing counsel, the attorneys doing that. But here in New York, it's very prevalent. The guards talk over you. I am shocked since it was less visible when we did the Zoom sessions, but now that courts are increasingly in public, you go there and you're experiencing humiliation ritual like nowhere else in your life. Like I'm being respected generally in other areas of my life, right? And you go to the court and they treat you like cattle. They shout at you. The court clerk shouts at you. The guards are there. This is unbelievable. It's all done. And that's my key theme. People need to understand that it has a grand design behind it, and the grand design is dehumanizing, right? They want to treat you like cattle. They want to reduce it to the most animalistic state. When you defend yourself, when you are discombobulated, when you don't know to whom to respond. Like at one point, I went to a hearing and I had 9 state-paid people around me. It's like I had the judge and I had one court guard, another court guard behind me, watching what I type on my laptop when I'm looking. And I have the state-paid attorney and the state-paid attorney for the children, right? And the state-paid interpreter and the state-paid, court assistant, and they all are around me, right? And they shout, you don't know who to address. And like I am by now, I'm a battle-hardened veteran of this insanity, right? And I also have experience in the courtroom in my prior life. I'm not an attorney here, and I'm defending my children, right? But can you imagine somebody who comes there for the first time? They cannot believe it's like it's a meat processing factory. It's literally what comes to mind. The metaphor is slaughterhouse. It is a slaughterhouse. They shout at you, they surround you, right? And of course, nothing comes there. I had an instance in my case when one of the court guards was apparently so pissed off, so
That's
annoyed
okay.
with with what we try to keep it PG-13, but he covered my microphone. He approached me, he swooped in from behind and covered the microphone was in front of me. He covered the microphone with a physical gesture to prevent my words from being recorded. I submitted the complaint. I didn't see him again, but so far nothing happened. I saw no personal accountability, at least in the court that I'm litigating. So yes, it's not only cameras, it's the microphones, it's subverting the record, it's preventing the record from being complete, all kinds of games. And then you are left with no remedy, right? So because when you go to the appellate court, they say they want you to certify the record, whereas you don't have an ability to have an independent record. So it's a very clever system. They try to close every potential avenue of exerting public accountability or public oversight.
I mean, it's such a broken system. I just think it should be abolished and taken back down to civil court so we can have a jury.
Yeah,
I don't know what your thoughts are.
Oh, I have so many thoughts, and thank you for bringing it up again, because we can dedicate many more hours that it's a legal education understanding, but it's not broken, and that's my key point, at least. That's what I'm quote unquote preaching. It is not broken. It's made by design. It's designed to work that way. That's what people need to understand, right? So the system is designed to create orphans, leaving children without parents, without fathers, without mothers. This is how you break society. It's ideological, and there's a sensitive topic that the judges don't like me talking about that. But again, it is protected by the First Amendment. Why do we see so many childless judges? In my case, Janet McFarland, I asked her point blank. I gave her the process that she doesn't give me. I asked her if she has children. She refused to answer. I asked the attorney for the children in my case. Her name is Rita Kaufman. If she has children, she started shouting at me. She couldn't answer a simple question. Why is it not relevant? Would you be treated for an eye disease by a doctor who is blind? Why to become a U.S. congressman or U.S. senator, you have to have an experience as a citizen, right? It's 5 years, I believe, for a congressman, a congresswoman, and then 7 years for the senator, right? So it's built in the Constitution because the framers understood, and people understand, that in order to perform a certain function, right, you have to have experience. Why? To be a family court judge, you don't have to have experience as a parent.
Yeah.
At some point, I was berated by a judge. I'm sorry, just to finish the thought, Marianne.
Okay.
There's certain things that I can do or cannot do during my supervised visitation. Like, what does she know? What does she know? Does she have children? Does she know how to treat children? Does she know how to entertain children? Right? Does she know how to try to to be a father in a situation when your parental authority is completely abolished, when you are bossed around by a social worker in a completely alienating setting, right? That's foreign, that's dirty, the worst area of the neighborhood, right? So, and she tells me what I should or should not do in my morsels of the time that the court graciously grants me. So this is what's going on. So now, again, this is what we observe. The question is why we observe that, right? So that childless judges, right? Childless attorneys for the children, right? So many people leading alternative lifestyles, right? And now again, we are, it's a compassionate society. I don't care what they do in their own homes, how they lead their lives. They swallow the government propaganda that they can do whatever they want and be a career professional, right? And completely disbanding other things that God wanted us to do, like having children, to procreate, not divide and conquer. And so they can do whatever they want. But why are they family court judges, right? And the answer is why? Because the ruling class wants them there, because it's much easier for those people who don't have children to process us like me. That's what's going on. And that ideological background layer is very important for people to understand, because it's not an isolated issue. We are facing the same tyranny everywhere. But family courts, of course, are very important because they take the children away. And that's the first, that's the generation of future people, right? Future Americans who can be free.
I just think these judges are personality disorders. I've only met two decent judges. But I don't know how they behave in other cases. However, I think they're all sociopathic in nature, and they identify with these attorneys that are also with the same personality disorder that they recognize and relate to. I don't know what you think of that.
I saw decent judges. I cannot say that all of them are bad, but my personal opinion and experience is the majority of them are very bad. They are
Mhm.
not fit to be judges. They need to be removed. Right now, there's no mechanism to remove them. It was supposed to be an impeachment process. In the history of New York, I think it was done 6 or 7 times, and not all of the cases were removal of judges. So they created another subversion process of CJC, the Commission on Judicial Conduct, which is a joke. This is a joke. Was created to gaslight the public and to bypass the constitutional avenue. It was created by the framers, wise people who saw tyranny, who fought tyranny. So the CGC is the majority of members are essentially, they have a super majority of judges and attorneys, right? So nominally they have 11 members, if I remember correctly. The majority are not judges, but when you add the attorneys to the judges, they are super majority, right? And majority, and of course, the attorneys, they earn their livelihoods by appearing in front of these judges or other judges that were well connected, big offices, or not necessarily big offices, but well connected individuals. And of course, they have a voting block and they do whatever they want. So there's no accountability, virtually no accountability to impose on the judges, and it's impossible to remove them, right? And they are selected. This is my argument. They are selected in such a way that those individuals who make these decisions will be as less attached as possible to the humans in front of them. They cannot relate to children. They cannot relate to parents because they're not parents and they have no children. So I don't know if it's a personality disorder. What we are dealing with. It's to some extent. I pity the judges as well, right? They're as slaves as we are, right? Because in a sense, they probably are privy to more secrets in the system, and some of them might be even blackmailed. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes? It's completely not transparent pyramid of control, right? But we are dealing with the third, fourth, or fifth generation of fatherless and motherless children in America. And of course, these judges, these attorneys, they grew up, I believe, in dysfunctional families as well, because this thing has been going on for generations. Again, the family court just in New York, it's 60 years old, and it started before with the juvenile court, and it's a very, very clever system. It was designed, I believe, decades ago.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I have seen, judges that do have families, but yet they're colluded with the opposing attorney. And I've heard of other parents having judges that don't have kids that are saying what you're saying. I think there's so much collusion as well as conflict of interest. I just think they should just abolish it and take it back to civil court. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, so but it's very clever, and you can see the same system all over again, right? So the government creates the problem, and then it offers a solution that brings you into further enslavement, right? Into more state of dependency on the state. So family court ostensibly was sold, quote unquote, to the public as a specialized, professional institution where people can focus on specific segment of audience, right? They have the expertise. So looks plausible, and that's what government does all the time. They sell you something plausible, right? And then they incessantly expand it until it's no longer traceable to its roots, right? So conceptually, family court might make sense, right? If you preserve the same due process. But what is the insidious argument? And that's very clever again. And jury trials, right? So what is essentially the government's argument? Why they are not letting us have jury trials in family court, right? They're saying family courts are not mentioned in the Constitution. This is an inane argument, right? So if Marian, you and I give an example all the time. We have a farm, right? And at some point we decide to split the farm, right? And we have a favorite cow, right? Favorite, I don't know, sheep, right? Favorite animal. We cannot decide. You and I, we can have a jury trial on that, right? It's an article of a dispute, right? That we can go to the court. Now, if we have a dispute over a child, right? No jury trial. What sense does it make? It makes no sense. The framers of the Constitution knew that government can oppress you through civil courts as well, right? So they set a limit, $20, right? It was adjusted to inflation. It's a couple $100s, right? But any civil dispute, not brought by the government, right? You have to have a right to jury trial. The fact that it's not mentioned in the Constitution, that's gaslighting. That's what government does, right? So they create a new label and they say, oh, because it wasn't mentioned, now it doesn't apply to you. Makes no sense. I give another example to clarify it. Let's say tomorrow the government decides to establish space courts. They decide that interplanetary exploration is a worthwhile subject, right? And we need to supply livers or corneas, I don't know, to the astronauts and the scientists who deal with that, right? And they subject any healthy specimen out of the population to the authority of the court, right? And you say, well, let's give me some due process. Give me no. Space courts were not mentioned in the Constitution, therefore, the 6th and 7th Amendment does not apply. It makes no sense. It was designed as a bulwark, and to prevent further pressure by the government. It's not functioning. I went on this very topic all the way up to the federal court. I submitted a federal complaint, federal law case, lawsuit here in Eastern District of New York. I lost on immunity grounds, right? Which is another topic that we need to do, because federal courts, people delude themselves. They think that federal courts work. They don't. They do not. So yeah. So and I went all the way. My case was dismissed because of absolute judicial immunity, which is insane. That's another thing that the judges invented for themselves. Nobody voted on judicial immunity ever, never. It's the Supreme Court declared this doctrine exists, and we are back to square one, like exactly like before the revolution, right? So we have a class that's immune; they can do whatever they want, right? No accountability. And I went to the Second Circuit. I lost there. The only thing I haven't exhausted yet is the Supreme Court, but I don't have any hope that they will help as well. So yeah, so that's what we're dealing with.
And to back you up with the federal court, I went through that and I submitted 1,000 pieces of evidence, exhibits, and he admitted in a telephonic phone conference that he didn't even look at them, and he just ruled them irrelevant. So I filed a motion to make him read this stuff. That's pretty bad when you have to file a motion to make somebody read your documents, and then 3 days later he's dismissing it. So I took it to the appellate court, and they dismissed the whole case about 3 months later. This is how they do it.
This is what subversion is, right? So we are dealing, and might sound bombastic, but Americans need to face reality. All of us need to face reality. By the way, it's global. So I on my page, I see people, I'm more connected to Israel. I lived there for many years. It's the same thing. It's even worse in Israel to some extent. In Israel, they don't have jury trials anywhere. I mean, no court. So civil court. That's the question, by the way. If it goes back to civil court, what makes us think that they won't prevent jury trials in civil court? By the way, in New York, just to mention that there is a provision in the domestic relations law, right? So family court is for couples who are already divorced, they fight over custody, or for couples who were never married. In New York, it's a very convoluted system, again, to confuse us, right? But the Supreme Court deals with marriages and dissolution of marriages. So it's governed not by Family Court Act, it's governed by domestic relations law. And they have a provision in the law that allows you to get a jury trial. Guess what? I have another father who reached out to me now, went public, Kelly Evans, and he asked for a jury trial in his case. He didn't get jury trial, even though it's in the law. So it doesn't matter. If you are under tyranny, right? It doesn't matter to what organ of the government you go. And back to your recent question, the most recent question. So yes, federal courts and family courts and the legislature, right? And the Bar Association and the academia, everybody was supposed to supervise, to provide protection for the public, right? To protect us. They are not functioning because it's all subverted. So it's pretty naive to go to ask for help from a tentacle of the government, from oppression done by another tentacle of the government. So federal courts, they do provide the decision. So I was shocked when I started this whole process how they don't provide any argumentation in family court, right? You have an order. If you even have an order, you can be issued an order. They don't want to even work. Like the majority of, I think one federal decision that I got in the initial court, the district court, was longer than all of my decisions in the family court combined. So they at least give you the courtesy of providing a decision, right? But it's a very expensive courtesy. You pay here in New York, you pay $400 something just to file, right? And $500 to file a federal appeal, right? So to get a longer decision that rejects you in the same way. So federal courts, it's a very again, it's a very clever side of this whole tyranny we are facing, because they invented the multiple abstention doctrines, right? So you have the domestic relations, you have the judicial immunity, as we mentioned, qualified immunity, absolute immunity, right? You have the state sovereignty. So they go out of the way in order to not see, not to hear, you know, and to not interfere with this conveyor belt of you know, orphans that comes out of family court. And we can talk about that because it's completely unconstitutional as well, right? So again, the judicial immunity is inane. Domestic relations, I think it's very interesting how they gaslight you, even in federal court, right?
Yes.
So they reject your potential, you know, potentially one of the ways for them to potentially reject you is to claim that, oh, it's a domestic relations issue. No, it's not. I'm coming to federal court because I'm asking for protection of my rights under 42 USC 1983, right? So my rights, my constitutional rights were violated by the judge. That's the question that I bring in front of the court, right? I'm asking you to protect my constitutional rights. That's what the law was there, right? No, it's a domestic issue. This is not a domestic, this is human rights issue, right? This is gaslighting. It's taking something, right? And shifting the conversation. So, and it's done all the time, right? So the judicial immunity, by the way, it's not many beautiful decisions that, again, they don't follow, right? Is that say that it's not a protection from suit. Potentially, you can say that the judge is immune. Even that is of course insane, right? Nobody voted on immunity again. But to block your lawsuit, you know, sua sponte, right, without even hearing the other side, the judge acts as a prosecution, as a representative of state, right, as a judge, right, and they just reject you. Never heard the arguments from the other state. If you get the response from the general attorney, from the attorney general, right, in the state, that's a win. That's a win because at least you got some. You know, some response. But you know, I have to say something that federal lawsuits can be useful in a sense that you do expose it, right? It's on file. It's a document that's out there in the public record, right? Anybody who has Pacer, they can see your arguments. So it's very, very important if you want to legally voice and present the evidence, right? And if you name the judge, right? Many judges will actually they are sensical, right? In my case, when I sued my judge, in my case, Peter DeLizzo, he removed himself from the case. He did remove, right? So, and I have to give credit at least for that. So he understood that from the moment he became a defendant in the civil suit, he could not continue in the case impartially, right? But you know, my current judge, Janet McFarland, despite all the complaints and my filings, right, she still clings to my case inexplicably, right? So she has, it's very clear to me, she has hatred, right, toward me, and I have nothing against her. She can have, you know, I wish her all the luck and all success in her personal endeavors. But in my opinion, she's not fit to be a judge. I submitted multiple complaints. I uncovered, for example, that she gave illegal donations that are prohibited for judges to political candidates, right? I exposed, and that's another topic that if we have time, I would like to talk maybe briefly about that. But I exposed the blatant, glaring nepotism in the assignments of attorneys in Staten Island, Richmond County Family Court. My background is I have an MBA from a leading university, not to brag, but that's my job. That's what I was paid to do by world leading corporations, largest corporations in the world. It's analytics. So I did an analysis. I have a video that I think it was quite popular. It still is, you know, on YouTube and on Facebook. And I show everybody how people actually, it's open data. You go to the schedules and you see who are the attorneys appearing in front of the judges. And I made the correlation. To me, it's simple, and I walk people step by step how to do it. It's a pivot table, right? And you can see that a certain cohort of judges and certain cohort of lawyers are tightly correlated. So you have superstars here in Staten Island Family Court, 10 or 20 attorneys who get the majority of cases. 60, 70% of cases go to the same attorneys, right? So, and you expose all that, and they still nobody cares, right? So so coming back to you know, to the some usefulness, federal court lawsuits can be useful if you have a somewhat more logical judge, right? And they understand that it's a conflict of interest. But sometimes you have unmovable judges, and I don't know what they're waiting for. Again, going back to the ideological structure, what we're dealing with, right? So the whole goal of the establishment is to show you that you have zero control. We have a ruling class, and you are nobody. That's why, you know, you go to the legislature, you can participate in hearings, for example, right? Theoretically, right? The executive branch, you can participate, or ostensibly the public is represented by journalists who don't function as well, in the press conference, right? But the judiciary is a completely stone idol, right? They don't engage in any dialogue with you. You cannot. They don't care, right? They don't care. The only thing that I saw working is actually Facebook or social media, right? So
Yes.
I write a criticizing article, and suddenly there's a reaction from the court, not directly to you, right? But you see that something's working. So we need to be very clever in this oppression, right? And see what tools are actually working. Right? Again, I'm not advocating for any violent insurrection, right? It has to be done in a peaceful way, and it's a very powerful weapon. So thank you for what you are doing, because social media is a game changer. We all need to be vocal. That's the only way. That's another lesson from my Soviet background. And the only thing the dictatorship understands and reacts to is publicity, and it's counterintuitive, it's frightening, but there's no other way. You have to go public. We all have to go, show our faces, be public, tell our stories, because it's the only way out of it. It's the only way, and nothing else works.
Well, in fact, when you mention that, I have interviewed Jim Schock, his case. I interviewed him with 2 of his attorneys, and then by himself. And he's in his case is in New York, and I believe it's Yonkers, with Judge Marianne Scatteratico-Neighbor, and they're just railroading him, and they're making things difficult for him to even see his child, which is absolutely crazy what they're doing, making him jump through hoops. I mean, he's literally put in, over 100,000 into an attorney, even a very high-end civil suit attorney. It was just so very disappointing for him to be put through this and wasted time with his child.
That's the system. That's the algorithm, and people need to understand. It's a very simple algorithm once you understand, right? So back to one of the aspects that you highlighted, Marianne, is how the system operates. They use any pretense. They just need a pretense. They don't need a reason. They don't need facts. They don't need logic. They don't need law. They need a pretense to isolate you from your child. Can be father, can be mother, right? They isolate you using any pretense, right? You don't get any fair treatment, no hearing, no petition, no appellate process, right? No supervision whatsoever, right? Now, and after that milestone is hit, the child is being isolated, right? They let the alienating party reign free, right? So it can continue. In my case, it continued almost for 2 years. I didn't have normal access to my children, right? I regained some form of access only after going public, right? Because people are, and I'm so grateful, people are watching the stuff that I'm putting on videos. People are coming to support me, right? This is very important because we are being hunted, right? And it's important to show the hunters, right? The predators that actually, no, we will not take it anymore. How long can I really don't understand. I know it's fearful. It took me time to develop, right? But there's really no other way. They came for us. They came for our children. Like, if you don't speak now, when will you speak? In the boxcars, in the camps? Because that's where it's going. It's not a conspiracy. In New York, we had legislation that was somewhat stopped by another brave attorney in New York, right? But it's on the books. It's on the books. They have the bill, right? To quarantine people, right? Is a governmental authority, right? And you see all this oppression. So they try to conceal it. Why? They don't talk about. You see the media blackout for that. That's why the podcasts like yours are very, very important. Why? Because they don't want people to know. They need the trap to be open as long as possible. So once the child is isolated, there's a time period throughout which the alienated parent can alienate, right? And then you go to the court. That's a switch, right? You go back to the court, and the judge says, "What can we do? What can we do? The child doesn't want to see you anymore. The child was dead. Doesn't what sense does it make? A small child, right? And that's how you connect the ideology, right? The child at the age of 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, right? They cannot decide whether to smoke a cigarette, right? To buy a beer, right? To drive a car, right? To vote, right? But they can select with whom parent they will live. What nonsense is that, right? Or moreover, and that's the case of James Younger, right? Which is very important for anyone in America to know, right? Like the child, his kid is 10, right? A child can decide what gender he will be, to change his physical attributes completely, and the same goes for girls, right? So if you remove an organ, right, you cannot regain it. And what insanity is this? And you can see these two dots connecting, right? That shows you that's ideology, right? To allow a small child brainwashed child, scared child, right, who was isolated from you for a prolonged period of time, to select with whom to live, right, or whom will raise it, right, him, him or her, sorry,
Mhm.
right, or to let a small child to decide what gender. Gender is also, it's a Overton window world, right? What sex they will have. It's the same thing, right? They're too small to do something, but not too small to do. It makes no sense. It only makes sense when you understand this ideology, and the idea is to ruin society, ruin the kids, ruin the parents. So the case from New York, yes, that's what they do. Zero accountability. Luckily we're seeing some more, awakening in New York. So you have freedom fighters, and it takes time, but there's no other way. We all need to speak and tell our stories, and that's how we break the narrative. And that's a message of hope. And I'm absolutely convinced. I'm now luckily I'm much more closer to my faith. I'm trying to be as observant Jew as I can, but I believe in God, and
Mhm.
we are seeing really, really big moves
Mhm.
made by higher powers right here. So, and the only way for us is to overcome fear, right? Because that's what the scripture tells us. In the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the expression "do not fear" is the most recurring. So we should not fear. We should speak, right? And when you show the stories, that's how you break the narrative. And to understand from the ideological perspective, Orwell said it best. I'm paraphrasing, right? So each tyranny, each government, they rely on 2 pillars, right? It's force and deception, right? So government has the monopoly on force. They have F-16s, they have the whatever. We cannot oppose them with violence. We shouldn't, right?
Mhm.
But the other leg of the colossus is the brainwashing, is the deception, it's the propaganda, it's
Mhm.
the controlling narrative, and that's what we are doing here. We need to break the narrative, because if you come with the stories, with the faces, and you say the system is corrupt, the system is designed to take away children, right? The
Mhm.
system is full by childless with childless judges. There's no appellate process. They don't review intermediary decisions that take your kids away, right? You have no jury trial, you have no due process, right? They don't read your motions, right? When you expose all that, even despite the fact that the media doesn't cover it, eventually it will propagate. People will understand it, right? And people are understanding, and it will all crumble peacefully, like the Soviet Union. Sorry for a long tirade, son.
No, that's fine. No, that's excellent. It's just such a shame that, Dr. Mark Roseman wrote in his book, Preserving Family Ties, that when this happens, it will disturb 6 generations. And, I just think these judges are identifying with the wrong party, and they're gaslighting the target parent all the time. It's just
Yeah.
very
So I think
frustrating.
we are the 6th generation now, right? To
Right.
refer to your example. So that basically it's the end, right? But it's going to be a good end. I have no doubt. But because we are commanded by God again to procreate, to have children, to raise children, right? We are facing evil forces executed through the courts. That's
Mhm.
the reality of it. It's a spiritual battle as much as it's a legal battle, that want to stop it, right? They want to control us. They want us to be of manageable size, right?
Yeah.
So that's the way. It's to discourage it all. And you cannot fight human nature, God given nature. So that's and commandment. So we will win. We will win. There's no doubt. The judges, again, some of them are brainwashed themselves. Some of them are victims themselves of dysfunctional families, right? Some of them are just lured by money. The family court judges are very highly paid here in New York.
Mhm.
It's last time I checked, you can request actually the payment information for the judge, and it's supposed to be an open record. They do create an additional step here in New York. Federal judges, by the way, the information is exposed, so we can talk about that. There's so many layers of this subversion and oppression, but they're paid over $200,000. They don't work a lot, right?
Mhm.
So the meetings, the hearings start at 9:30. They leave probably at 4:30, 5. Maybe they work at home, maybe they don't. They have state holidays, right? Many times you come to a court, you clearly can see, like you referred to, Marianne, right?
Mhm.
They never read your case. So
Yeah.
it's a nice job, right?
Mhm.
And the again, like I exposed, and I ask people, I encourage people, because I cannot get it out to the mainstream media. I believe it will happen eventually, because the analysis is very, very solid. And I actually had some contacts with mainstream media on that. But what they do, they disperse the cases, the state, essentially state contracts of 18B, which is the state-appointed attorney to a litigant, and AFC, attorney for the children, they're called in New York. They're actually attorneys against the children. They don't represent the child interest. They represent the state. So, but these are contracts that are paid by the state, right? And the assignments are made by judges in a completely obscure, non-transparent manner. So, and I show the correlation. So you can clearly see that you have a handful of favorites by a certain judge, and the majority of cases go to them. You rank them, and you see, like in my case, the attorney that represents the other party in my case, Ian Berliner, right? He's one of the favorites. He gets a lot of cases from the judges. So that's not normal. The public needs to oversee it. Why I need to dig through, again, open data, right? Do the analysis and show that him or Rita Kaufman, the attorney who represents, he's the AFC in the case, she's the AFC in the case. Why did they get? Why they're at the top of the chart, the best hits, right? In front of certain judges. So in my opinion, that's a huge part of what is going on, right? So you have the untouchable judge who has a very cushy, very luxurious job, right? It disperses, all these assignments to attorney friends, right? Who actually to earn very, very decent living, more than decent, right? When you see some of these attorneys are actually spouses of judges, so you can get some glimpse of information about how much they earn. They can easily do 200, 300K a year. These attorneys, state attorneys, people think state attorneys are poor. They are not. They get a lot of cases, right? And they barely do any work. Again, they get a lot of cases, right? They bill the hours. Nobody can see the billing. I asked for the billing. By the way, I asked for the payment information from the state authorities here, the city authorities, right? And I submitted a freedom of information request, right? They keep dragging me along for months, almost a year now. They keep extending the timeline. So there's no way for the public to supervise, right? So that's what's going on. So so you have it's a group of people. It's very clever, right? Even within judges, you have different subsets. Some are genuinely brainwashed, right? Some, I have to mention, some are, very, I would say, ardent feminists, right? Who think that that's ideologically, mothers need to raise children, which is wrong, right? But that's what they promote through the bench, right? So and you have the childless judges who think that no, they don't need a parent. You have communist, potentially, ideologically brainwashed people who think that no, it's the state knows better. So it's a group. But anyway, what we don't have is public accountability and supervision, and that's what we need to do, because it's our government. It's our government. They work for us, right? They want us to forget it, but they work for us. And everything we say here is protected by the First Amendment. And if we don't utilize our First Amendment, it will be gone, like the Sixth and Seventh Amendment guaranteeing jury trials are gone in the family court.
Well, even when these kids are sequestered with these judges and attorneys, in my case, he was about maybe 15. He just told the judge, we just want to go back and forth between the houses like we had for 10 years, because we had co-parented well until a third party inserted herself. But anyway, as soon as they came out of that room, my attorney ran over to me and said, they're twisting your son's words. So they totally disregarded what this kid said, and they just kept him with someone who was not a good idea. And it's all in that collusion, and with no oversight in there either when they're sequestered with these kids.
Yeah, that's another atrocity that takes place commonly in family court, and that's it's not being talked about enough. So the in-camera interviews, in my opinion, and there's actually, I have again, I posted, people can watch, you can search for it. There are judicial opinions that declare the in-camera interviews as child abuse. There were judges who wrote that, appellate level judges, right, who wrote that the interviewing a child, sequestering a child, with a judge and an attorney, right, two state employees in a room that they never been before, maybe been before, but it's a completely frightening, alienating, environment for a small child, right? Not to mention that the parental authority is completely removed by the state. No mother, no father. We are your mother and father now, right? In very, very scary situation. And take their words. What is that? What is that? And here in New York, it's unbelievably insidious, because these in-camera interviews, right? Ostensibly they are recorded, right? Maybe they are recorded, maybe they're not. Why? Because you as a parent, you have no access to the transcript. They will not give you the transcript. So your children are there with the judge, childless judge, with an attorney for the children, against the children, who is also childless, right? There are questions who know what, questions who know what. The answers, the answer who knows what, right? The record is not accessible to you. But you know what's more insidious? Because we are all sheep to them, right? So it's not only you who is me. The wool is also good, right? If you appeal, the appellate court can see the transcript. But what is the funny part? You need to pay for the transcript that you will never see. They mock us, they laugh at us, with the system, right? So it is children are children, right? They're malleable, they're small, they're brainwashed, they're frightened, right? The psychological mechanism has been described times and times again, right? So if you take one parent out of the picture, right? The child is small, they're physically small, you can move them, right? They depend on the clothing, on food, right? On another parent, they are afraid, they don't know what happened. Adults don't understand what happens in the system, right? It takes time for people to process that we are under surreptitious tyranny here in America through family courts, right? So what a child can understand. Somebody took my father away or my mother away, right? Now I'm left with another parent, right? And what if the other parent disappears? What can I do? I'm so small, I'm frightened. Where will I get food? Who will take care of me, right? So it's an intentional mechanism of enmeshment, propagated, aided, and abetted by the government. That's what they do, right? And this whole frightening, this whole creation of that scare, of course it impacts the children for life. That's what they want. They want broken parents, broken children, right? I am not productive. I'm productive, I think, in the right way, because I bring awareness, and I'm fulfilling, I believe, my purpose through that, and you as well, right? So the parents like us who talk, but we cannot do anything normally useful for society, right? So we only fight. So they tie us into that, right? The children are completely broken because they cannot get normal access to both parents like they usually need, absent very extreme circumstances that needs to be proved in front of a jury with due process, right? And that's what government wants. Generation after generation of broken children, broken adults, right? Who are easier to control, easier to manipulate, and eventually to enslave.
Exactly, and they're also teaching these kids not to trust anybody, not to trust law enforcement, not to trust, even their own parent. People have said, well, when a kid is 15 or 14, they're allowed to decide where they want to live. And I always say, no, they're not. The judge makes a decision where they're going to live.
Yes. Yeah. I said it was a popular post. What we are dealing with is adultification of children and infantilization of adults. That's what we're dealing with, right? So in certain areas where it serves the government agenda, the kids are allowed to make decisions, right? When it doesn't, they're not. So this is schizophrenia, right? That's what it is. But again, it's all by design. So we need to understand it's a very clever system, designed, scripted. They have a playbook. That's not the playbook that we see, but in New York, there's actually a playbook of decision making, rule book. It's a document, right, for judges. But of course, we understand it's a script, and that's why your arguments don't penetrate, right? You go and you present, and they don't care. You're just like talking to a robot, right? And you appeal, they don't care. You appeal to the Court of Appeals, they don't care. You go to a federal court, they don't care. You go to legislature, they don't care. Who cares? Other people, right? And they do care about social media, because that's where the exposure is. And I can talk. I saw a couple examples, but I know we're at the top of the hour. So
I mean, go ahead if you want to add it.
Oh, maybe just briefly. So I think because we all need everybody, right? So if somebody if not everybody's free, we are all slaves, right? We need to free everyone, and that's why we need all the voices, right? I know it takes time. I know it's scary to put your face out there. Maybe people are not eloquent. I have an accent, right? So, but we still need to be to talk. We still need to present our cases, because there's no other way. That's what they want, to smother us, in silence in the corner, right? And if we don't speak out, we don't speak up now, right? It will never happen, because they are moving in a very concrete direction. It happened time and time again. And it's hard for people to perceive it's America, right? But it happened. Russia was a prosperous country. Cuba was a prosperous country. Venezuela was a prosperous country, right? There were successful countries who were subverted, rotten from within, right? And then the government completely took over. So we need to be we need to be open. We need to be brave. What else do we have to lose? They came to take your children, and even parents who are not divorced, right? They already set up facilities in schools, right, to introduce. I know that we need to be careful about the censorship, which is insane, censorship in America, right? to introduce certain medical procedure to your children without your consent, right? So how more dots do you need to connect? They all touch each other, right? So what I'm trying to say, I'm trying to give maybe a message of encouragement. The Vicky Navarro's case, right? She needs help. She's been oppressed now. She and again that shows you, right? So mothers and fathers need to talk together and work together, right? So we here in New York, we try to support each other. What happened in the when one of the hearings were televised or live streamed by James Kelly, and I provided a commentary, right? I said, because what happened is the judge went through the list of all court watchers and said, "What's your name? What are you doing here?" Right? So on the record. So this is government intimidation, pure and simple. That's the first thing. Second of all, of course, it wastes time, right? So, and again, it prolongs the case. The child can be alienated farther away. So it's all designed, right? But the asking of the names of the court watchers is illegal. Section 4 of the judicial law here in New York does not give judges any authority, right? If a person came physically to the court, would sit, on the bench, nobody would ask usually, right? Again, some judges violate the law. Some judges, by the way, uphold this law. So after that happened, it took, I don't know, 15 minutes, 20 minutes to go through all the court watchers, which is encouraging. People need to court watch for each other. Judges need to know that we as members of the public completely peacefully, completely legally oversee what they're doing. We watch you. We see what you are doing. It's important. It's our government. We want to see how you execute your duties, right? But intimidating court watchers, members of the public, by asking what their names are, what their relation to the case is government threatening, essentially. Well, that's what it is. So I wrote a blog post about that, right? And what do you think happened? The next hearing, completely smoothly, it was done. It was done badly, but it was done in 5 minutes, right? Because they didn't. So if I wrote a motion, if Vicky submitted the motion, they would probably ignore it, right? But when I put a post up on social media, right, it worked. It worked. They read the stuff that we write. They do read. They will never admit it because the kettle is not supposed to have a say in how the ranch is ran, right? But they read it, okay? And I saw multiple examples. I complained about my support magistrate that she didn't let me use my my laptop, which was essential. I have thousands of documents scanned. I cannot bring all this, huge binders, right? She said no. First, she said no, and I wrote a post. Next time, yes, you are allowed. They put a sticker on my camera. It's ridiculous still, right? But they read. So that's why it's important. If you don't have a normal channel of communication to the judges, they don't read the motion. They only gag you. That's what they do, right? But at least you make it public, and that's how the system is slowly forced to react and to act legally. That's all we want, to act legally. Follow your own constitution, follow your own laws. So only encouragement. People need to be brave. We all need you. Everybody who watches that, please go tell your stories. That's the only way out. And the more people speak out, the quicker, the faster it will end.
Right. And I have parents that want to come on, and we'll set up a date, and then they'll back down and say, wait, I have a hearing coming up maybe after that. And, in the case of Jim Schock, the judge was railroading him with the Second Right Amendments. I don't believe, it's hard to fathom that she could take away his guns. He hasn't done anything. He doesn't even have a speeding ticket. And also,
what's surprising is there's no amendment that has not been violated. There's no amendment that hasn't been violated, right? So you have gag orders, you have no jury trials, there's no due process, right? There's no equal protection under law, nothing. They do whatever they want, So the Constitution is a piece of paper in family court, right? So, and if you get some justice, you need to fight for years, spend untold amounts of money, right? And that's again, people need to understand it's not the court. The fight is not legal. The fight is ideological, right? We are being oppressed through the courts. The courts are now, the family courts especially, and all the courts, in fact, are an ideological arm of the government, right? They do everything to stall, to deceive, to gaslight you, right? To prolong it and to arrive to their goals. You get an inch, they take a mile, right? So that's you give an inch. That's what's going on. So nothing surprising. And if history teaches us anything, right? And I grew up as a kid under Soviet dictatorship. I grew up on Soviet literature. I read Solzhenitsyn, Varlam Shalamov, all the famous dissidents, right? The only way to break this tyranny is through breaking the narrative. It's through exposing it. And the moment most people understand that the government is lying to us all the time and bringing us into a very, very certain direction of full enslavement, right? The faster it happens, the faster it will fall. Soviet Union looked very mighty in 1991, right? They had the military parade with the planes and the tanks and everything, right? And enslaving multiple republics, tens of hundreds of millions of people in Eastern Europe as well. And what happened in August? In 3 days, it fell. Why did it fall? Because people understood that, the government is lying.
Mhm.
At some point, it clicked. Nobody came out to defend it. By the way, it's very interesting. So, like one of my, parents who reached out to me, I mentioned his name, Eli Evans. He's a former NYPD officer, right? And firefighters are reaching out to me, police officers, right?
Mhm.
It's everywhere. People need to understand, right? So the oppression is devouring the government. The tyranny is devouring everyone. They will come for everyone, right? So
Mhm.
the sooner we expose it, we talk about that, the sooner this nightmare will end, and I have no doubt it will end. We are fighting God's fight to be parents, to have children, to raise them. It's not the government. These are our children. They are not government's children.
Right, right, and another thing that's mind-boggling is there are still people out there that think family court is not corrupt. Uh,
It's institutional corruption, right? So it's personal people. We have, it's hard to get evidence because they are so covered. I submitted FBI complaints against my judge, right, with all the evidence. So far, I haven't seen a response. Maybe they are investigating. Who knows, right? But we have concerns about FBI as well now. People who follow the news. But anyway, it's institutionalized. That's the issue, right? So our oppression is institutionalized. We are oppressed by the laws, by the process, by the steps of how the judges are selected, how they're removed or not removed. That's everything is structured in such a way that we have no recourse. Our only recourse is publicity, is social media, is being brave, praying, and
right.
we will persevere. I have no doubt. Every tyranny fell, and this tyranny would fall as well.
I'm so glad you came on my podcast. I'm totally honored to have you on. If someone has any questions for you, how can you be reached?
Well, I have a Facebook page, so I don't hide. I think it's very important to show your real name, real faces. That's one of the key aspects in fighting tyranny peacefully. Roman Brik, Roman Brik on Facebook, on YouTube. Reach out to me. People reach out to me all the time through Messenger. I'm not an attorney, not in the US at least, but I have unfortunately a lot of experience. So people, I try to give advice and help, and please follow. And
Yes.
please follow Marianne as well. You are doing a terrific job. Thank you for giving voice to the voiceless.
And thank you. And I'd like to have you back on again in the future when you have time to, because I know you're in the middle of a lot of things.
Anytime. I have so much to talk about. It's of course, one show will not do it. But yeah,
Well, hey,
yeah,
we can do a
it's wonderful.
series. That's fine with me too.
We'll be in touch for sure. Yes, absolutely. I'd be honored as well. Thank you, Mary.
Awesome. Well, hey, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I am your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Roman Brik in the future and other exciting guests. Thank you for your time, Roman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marianne.